Welcome to Two Cool Wheels. My name is Mike. This is a bike. Today on We Two Cool Wheels, we're going to completely restore this 2024 Kawasaki. It's not a Kawasaki, it's Yamaha. I guess I could have looked at the tank badge, huh? Oh, I guess it would help if I put my Coke bottle bottoms on so I could see. It's a Star. You said it was Yamaha. Oh, they're the same thing, huh? We'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about V-Star and Yamaha. And no, we're not going to restore the bike. It's actually in pretty darn good shape. But like so many bikes, it sits a lot. And when bikes sit a lot, well, the fuel turns into some weird chemical compound that, well, it doesn't flow very well and it smells sort of like cheap furniture polish. And so this particular bike, well, it's running on one cylinder, sort of. So it's running good enough to get it in here. It belongs to my friend Cindy. Cindy's having kind of a tough time because she wants to get a little wind therapy. Her husband's got cancer. She's dealing with all that. And those of us who ride know that one of the best things you can do when you're trying to deal with life's problems and hassles is to get out there and get a little wind therapy. Helps you clear your mind and be able to take on the day's problems. So we're going to hook Cindy up. We're going to delve into this Yamazuki Kawasaki Japanese motorcycle, and we're going to clean up those carburetors, because I would say it's probably the most common thing I end up doing with any bike, whether it's one that's a project bike that I purchased for myself or a friend's bike, is cleaning those carburetors. And you don't always have to buy a kit. Sometimes you have to. But in a lot of cases, all it takes is cleaning out a couple of very tiny passages and it runs just as good as new. So that's what our project will be on today's episode. So stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least two cool wheels.
The Star motorcycle, or V-Star, VX 1100. This was Yamaha's competition for the big American cruisers like Harley Davidson. But they started off, oddly enough, as an instrument manufacturer. In 1887, they started their company off and they were building organs and other string instruments. And to this day, they build some very high-quality pianos and guitars. Then along came World War II, and they kind of had to shift gears, and they went into building airplane components. When the war was over, they started building small-scale two-stroke motorcycles, and they won a lot of races. They continued to build two-stroke motorcycles up into the 60s, and they also built large inline four-cylinders, such as the XS 1100 shown here, the largest at its time. This is one that I restored a few years back. Kind of wished I had hung on to it. It's a really nice bike. But you also have to remember they continue to race all this time, and they're known for their sport bikes. To this day, they make some very competitive sport bikes. Their V-twins start off with the Virago. It was a very popular bike, but they needed a bigger bike, a little bit more in consistency with American cruisers, and along came the Star series. They came in 250, 650, 950, 1100, and 1300. Alrighty. So to start off with, to get to the carburetors, Victory? Yeah, well, I didn't say this channel was going to be just Victory motorcycles. I mean, I work on a little bit of everything. We do have a Victory project coming up on our next video. Another guy I know, his transmission locked up and he's got a trike. I've never taken a trike apart, so that's going to be a challenging one. But I've worked on these before, so for the first official how-to video, we're going to stick with something I've actually done before, and we're more likely to have a successful video that way. Nonetheless, get to the carburetors, the seats have got to come off, and the tank's got to come off. So we'll start off back here, and remove the nut holding the seat in place. How about we'll turn this off? And then we have a couple of bolts right there that need to be removed. That the cable harness for the instrument cluster is right up under here, and it plugs in down here somewhere. So this panel's got to be removed as well so we can unplug our instrument cluster. Go. Come to Papa. There it is. And she's got lots of gas in her. You've got a duct coming from here, goes into this air box. All that's got to come off. There's a screw here. If I remember right, there's a vent hose down underneath here somewhere. If all this comes off, and then this comes off, we can actually get to the carburetors themselves. There's a rubber plug-in mount right there, and then like I said, there's a hose down here that just is a vent. So that comes off. Okay, got a bolt here, and we got several screws. You can probably get this out in one piece. I think it's actually easier to split it in half. So you take these screws out all the way around, take the top half off. It's easier to get the bottom half in and out, in my opinion. I got a rubber gasket, don't want to lose that. May have to figure out a way to glue that in. You'll see there's a lot of blow-by builds up inside this air box. It's a good opportunity to clean all that stuff out. We still have to disconnect the boots going into the carburetor, so you've got a clamp, see if you can see it, right through here. Alright, you've got a screw here. Kind of hard to see. And another one here holding the elbow to the bottom of the housing. You get it loose. You also have this hose here to disconnect from the valve cover because it comes off with it. So it's got a little squeeze clamp on it. The air box comes off without pulling the elbows. Now you can take the elbows out. Okay, oh, that's pretty grody. Put on my pile of parts here. All right, now we can at least see the carburetors. There's two carburetors. One faces one way, one faces the other. So we're going to disconnect it. There's, again, a clamp back over here, clamping the boot to the intake. There'll be a similar one on this side. We also have a couple of electrical connections to deal with. We've got an electrical connector here for a TPS, so there's a plug on the other side, and this is, I think, an up idle, not sure, but this one's throttle position sensor. So even though these are carbureted, they still do have some electronics controlling them. And then, of course, we have our throttle cable here, which is going to have to also be disconnected. And then you have a vent hose right here for the vent, fuel vent. And then once we get those, we should be able to pluck this carburetor out of here. Well, now up to this point, I've been in such a hurry to get to the carbonators because they're not carbonating properly that, well, I didn't really show you what the symptoms were that we were chasing to begin with. So I've connected my little extremely low budget but very handy artificial gas tank to the fuel system here, just so you guys could hear what it sounded like when I have restrictions in one or both of my carburetors. First of all, the bike's not going to do anything until it's given full choke. Because it's of the restrictions, it's just simply not getting enough fuel. Now when I fire the bike up, you'll notice you only hear one cylinder firing. And every once in a while, the missing cylinder will get just enough gas in it to make an occasional pop. But it doesn't fire for every revolution. Feel the exhaust pipes, and I can feel which one has a thrust to it. That's the one that's firing. The other one is not. If I try to give it any kind of throttle, just falls right on its face. Opening the throttle up introduces more air, and there's not nearly enough fuel to compensate, and so it just falls on its face. So those are the symptoms that are typical of a restricted metering system in the carburetor. Now that I've demonstrated what it sounds like, you guys have a little bit better idea what the symptoms are. We're going to go ahead and take that carburetor out of there. I'm going to fire it up again so you can listen to it. And any minute now I should start feeling a pretty good carbon monoxide buzz because I'm in an enclosed garage. Only on one cylinder. Can't give it any throttle. Yeah, I better stop now. I'm starting to feel a little woozy already. Yeah. Better than that long old roach I smoked earlier. Have this solenoid here, and then on the other side, I pointed it out before, there's some kind of a solenoid over here, and then there's also our TP sensor, right there. All three of those components are on a bundle of wires right here, coming right up the middle. So you got to cut some zip ties. They all come up this way, and this is where they all connect. So we have to disconnect all these because all that stuff comes out with the carburetors. We will disconnect our throttle cable, and we will disconnect a couple of small vacuum hoses and vent hoses. Just make sure that we don't lose the little clamps because they're spring-loaded clamps, and well, spring-loaded clamps, they tend to bounce across the shop and go into a black hole somewhere. So this is the boot that holds the carburetor to the intake. We're going to loosen one up on each side. I've already disconnected the throttle cable. I should come out pretty easily. Alright, you little beggar. Comes the Papa. Pull this side out from here. And simultaneously pull this side out here. Well, wires are already unplugged. Alright. Yeah, we're still kind of tangled. There's a few other fuel line. Doesn't like me. Oh, I missed a line. Gotta undo that one. So, should be able to remove this now. Comes out this side. Kind of rotates out. Comes out on this side. Now, I managed to leave the choke cable connected, but we'll disconnect that quick enough. That is our choke cable. Work with me here. Work with me. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Have all our cables disconnected. Have all our wires and our hoses. And as you can see, intake, and this goes into the cylinder, and on the other side, same thing. This is the intake from the ducting, and this goes to the cylinder. So they're facing opposite directions. We'll tear into this here. I want to mention is while we've got everything torn apart, this is the inline fuel filter. So you don't necessarily have to go to Yamaha. If you take it with you to a parts counter, I'm sure they can find one of similar size with the same size hose nipples on either end. And even though this isn't a specific size clamp, you don't necessarily have to use that. You could use a large zip tie if you couldn't get a genuine Yamaha replacement fuel filter. But we, of course, want to do that if we're cleaning up our carbs. We want to make sure no dirt gets in it from this point forward. Well, I was getting all ready to take these carburetors apart and clean them, and it dawned on me I didn't have any carburetor cleaner. It's kind of essential if you're cleaning carburetors. So I'm going to jump in Stranger, take a little trip down to the auto parts store. I had to go there anyway. I had to get that fuel filter that I pointed out earlier. So I'm going to head down there, pick up some carburetor cleaner, and a little bit of bearing mints to put in the fuel tank to keep the fuel clean and a new fuel filter. So we'll be right back.
So I mentioned Stranger. Stranger is my 1983 Ford Ranger, and hence you can see ST version of the Ranger. It's a truck I've had for 32 years. These Rangers had a fairly heavy-duty frame. Now this particular one has the 2.3 liter inline four-cylinder, same engine that they used in the Ford Pinto. I've updated it to fuel injection, but it's still a four-cylinder. That four-cylinder engine was barely enough power to propel the four-wheeled incendiary device down the road, and they went and put it in a fairly heavy-duty vehicle, such as a Ford Ranger. This Ranger's four-wheel drive, so it has the additional drivetrain and oversized tires for maximum rolling resistance. That, combined with a nice square-shaped body, which has the aerodynamics of a brick, made for a very slow vehicle. Hence the ST, which stands for slow truck. Now, even though it's very slow, it runs really good. So I thought I would go ahead and make it look good as well. I went ahead and sprung for some bodywork and some paint from one of the local body shops here. They did a fantastic job. So now it looks good, runs good, it's just slow. The truck's probably worth $2,500 and I spent about $6,000 in bodywork and paint. Who does that? Well, that would be me.
Is the the best.
Okay, got what I need. Some carburetor cleaner, a little chem tool, something I highly recommend. It removes varnish and scum and stuff from your fuel system, but also from your intake valves and so forth. So it's something you might want to add on occasion. And I also have a small set of, I don't know what you would call them. They're like little tiny wire files. They're used in electrical applications for cleaning solder joints in circuit boards, but they're also very handy for cleaning out the tiny passages in carburetors. They look like little pieces of wire, but if you look really closely, they actually have some abrasive edges on them that can actually remove harsh deposits and so forth. You just want to be careful because many of these passages are brass, and if you use this a little too aggressively, you could actually remove brass and change the diameter of the small passage you're attempting to clear. Now, I picked a perfect day to be doing this because I'm going to be using a harsh chemical carburetor cleaner spray, and I picked a day when I have a split thumb, so that way I can be assured that the carburetor cleaner is full strength and is actually going to etch away any kind of deposits that are in that carburetor. And that way I'll be absolutely assured, instead of just relying on the toxic fumes to let me know that it's potent enough to do the job today. So that'll be nice. I'll enjoy that. Okay, stay there. First thing we want to do is remove the float bowl so we can get to the passages and the needle seat and all the stuff inside. And I've got quite a few wires in the way. So I'm going to remove the zip ties, and we can always reattach zip ties afterward because this solenoid has got to come off with it, with the float bowl to get inside. So we'll just snip a few of these. Okay. And we have another sensor of some kind here. We're going to remove that. And we'll do these float bowls one at a time. First I'll go into this one, clean it all up, put it back together, and then I'll go into the one on the other side, clean it out, put it back together. That way I don't run the risk of accidentally putting wrong things in the wrong place. All right. To remove it, it's simply 4 screws. I don't know if you can see it here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. This one's got a bracket. Don't lose that bracket. And then this float bowl will come right off. Once the screws are out, then we can remove this float bowl. It's a little bit of a tight fit. You got to wiggle a little because there's an O-ring holding it. And well, actually the inside looks pretty clean. Okay, we'll just set that aside. And you can see the floats here. They're plastic floats. They don't seem to be holding any fluid. If they're leaking and filled with fluid, that would definitely cause it to run rich, not lean, just the opposite of what we're seeing. We also want to look real closely down at the needle and seat right down here. Make sure that when the floats move, it raises and lowers that seat. I don't know if you can see the needle moving up and down, but it's doing its job. The problem lies, and we have different jets here for different parts. You have, I'm not sure which one's which, but you have main metering, you have idle circuit, and you have these jets. They all come out. They all just held in by a regular blade screwdriver, and there's a third one way down here. You take those out and you use these little wire sets that I talked about, this tool, to clean those out, along with a little bit of brake cleaner spray. And of course clean any deposits you find in the area. So I'll take this jet out of here. You might be able to see what I'm talking about. I don't know how well this will turn out, how much in focus it'll get. But if you look real closely, there's some tiny little holes that have to have fluid flow through them. And you can see there's a lot of deposits built up. Not sure how good the focus is on this particular camera. And then also there's an opening in this end as well that needs to be cleared out. So we're just going to go through and we're going to sit there with our little tool here and clean those passages out and follow it up with some of our carburetor cleaner spray to make sure that they're clear. And again, try to find a size that fits those tiny openings. Yeah, they got lots of crud in them. But you can see that it goes all the way through on that particular one. And there's lots of crud coming off. Like that. When you're done poking them out, you want to take some carburetor cleaner spray. You always want to use this little plastic tube because it'll get you down into those nice, small, tight places. I can get it to go on there. Not only that, but if you use the plastic tube and you're shooting into here, it's very good at redirecting the spray directly into your eyes. Once again, to confirm that the chemical is full strength and is able to etch away at anything. So we'll just get in there and shoot it all in there. And see how it's blowing out the sides. You know you've cleared it out. And I would repeat that process for all of these small passages. There's a tiny one here. I can see a little bit of light through it, but I'm going to go ahead and run my some carburetor cleaner and that tool through it. There we go. Got a nice shot right in the chest there. It's burning the flesh. I'm sure it would do very well on the eyes as well. So we know this is good full strength carburetor cleaner. Just the stuff we need. Here's the other small one here. Those little tiny passages there, you can see they're pretty clear. The problem with this one is going to be a really tiny passage there, and in fact, the smallest rod that I have is actually a little bit on the small side, but I think it'll clean it out just fine. So it does take a little working sometime. And then again, I always want to verify that I can push carburetor cleaner through it and squirt all the way through. Where'd my car cleaner go? Make sure it makes it to the other side. There we go. Squirting all the way through. I know that one's clean. Okay, so I've done the same on the other side. Pull that cover off. You do have a couple of wires to contend with. Just unplug them. They unplug. Get them out of your way. Get in there and clean those passages out real well. And then you should be good to go. One other thing I like to do is, you've got a lot of mechanical linkages in here and so forth. So I always like to put just a couple of drops of WD-40 on them to ensure that they're going to operate smoothly and easily. So just a couple of drops, in a few places. Okay, a couple of drops. Just a little. There we go. Now my linkages will be very, very happy, and they'll just open and close and all that. Now it's just a matter of putting it back in. One of the things I like to do is put a little bit of lubricant. Doesn't have to be anything, a little Vaseline or something around the part of the carburetor that goes into the boot and the intake. It'll assist in going in there so you'll get it fully seated. Otherwise, if it gets pinched or oiled over, you may have difficulty getting it in. So that's one of the things we're going to do. Just a little bit of lubricant on there. Now that it's all back together, one thing I like to do is before I put the gas tank and seat and all that other stuff back on, I always want to give it a test start and make sure that the problem is resolved. So I've got my low budget fuel tank attached, which is now leaking and getting gas everywhere. So we'll make this quick. Get on. I've got about half choke this time, not full choke. Fires right up. Now look at this throttle. Once it warms up, I've got a little bearing through the system, should run just fine. runs beautiful now. Way better than the way it was running when I got it here. So I think Cindy will be happy. I'm going to give her a call and see if she wants me to change the oil as well. And we'll get it back to her so she can get out there and get some good wind time. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.